So welcome back, everyone. We are live on Facebook, so hi to everybody out there. I have my next guest who I thank you for being on earlier. That was really fun how you just stepped in like that. We have now with me Susan Pintel. She's the owner of Pintel Family Law. Welcome to the show. You talk about my favorite subject, which is divorce.
Yes.
You know, and not that I've had more than one. I've only had one.
Which
But
is more than enough.
yeah, it was way more than so if I only knew
Yes.
that I probably should have called someone like you. So first of all, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, obviously what you do, and what we're going to talk about today.
So my name is Susan Pintel. I own family. I do family law. I've been doing that for 18 years here in the Valley. And so essentially, if you are looking at prenuptials in anticipation of marriage, if you are unfortunately at the end of your marriage and you need to get through a divorce with or without minor children, if you've never been married but you have children with somebody else and there's a custody issue involving parenting time or child support, or if you've already been through the legal system and now you're trying to either enforce or modify an order from a prior ruling, I can help you with all of that. So that's what I do.
That's what she does. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about hiring an attorney or do mediation. I think they're completely different
Yes.
things. First, I'm going to ask you some things that are not here.
Right.
How does somebody know whether or not mediation would be right or not?
So I wanted to talk about this today because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about the process. A lot of people tell me, well, I don't want the divorce to get uglier than it needs to be. Attorneys just fan the flames. I don't want this to get expensive. I've heard that mediation really works, and I think that there's a place for everything. I think that how you approach it, at what point do you bring mediation in, I think that makes all the difference. So I've gotten a couple of clients this week who said to me, hey, I spent a lot of money in mediation. I spent a month and a half in mediation, and it just didn't do anything, and I need an attorney now. And so I think what I would tell people out there is that I do believe in mediation. What I would say is I just don't believe in putting mediation as the first step. And the reason for that is because, and forgive my digression, it's like when I was very little and I was never a sports person and I would go out and play baseball and I would just not know when to go run around the bases, and I would do it and I would strike out and my teammates would hate me, which is why I was chosen last. But the point is that, unless you know the rules of the game, you don't know what the hell you're doing. And so when you go into mediation is really great when you have somebody who, as the mediator, their role is to help you guys come together and reach agreements, which is a wonderful thing, which is what we all strive for. But if you don't know what the rules are, then chances are you're going to come away not knowing what just happened. And what do I mean by that? So I had a client who was basically saying, hey, Susan, I really don't want to hire you. I'm in mediation. We got a parenting plan. And so that, okay, that's really fantastic. And then 2 days later, he called and said, hey, I didn't realize that because of X, Y, and Z, now this was going to be impacted this way. And that was the only reason why, my soon-to-be ex-spouse wanted the parenting time to be that way. And so I said, well, that's exactly why if you consult with an attorney first, right, understand what state law has to say, right, understand what the parameters are for what the child support is going to look like, what some of the mostly accepted parenting plans are, and kind of have a sense of where you're going holistically instead of just here, we're going to talk about this today. Because sometimes I hear, and I don't have anything against mediators, but sometimes I hear that's all that they want to focus on. And I really think that you kind of, as the participant in this process, you need to know how all of the pieces come together, not just what we're doing here today.
I want to ask you something. As you've been an attorney here, 18 years you've been being an attorney, family law, have you seen a difference in, from years ago to today? Because our whole world has changed. Divorce is divorce,
Yeah.
but our world has changed. Are you seeing anything different in that you see?
I am. When I first started, you could get in and out of a divorce in, again, if you had reasonable people, really good attorneys on both sides, and we were working really towards that settlement, you could probably get in and out in about 6 to 9 months. We've grown. We're now the 5th largest city, and it's really made an impact. So I jokingly tell clients, and you've heard me say this before, Carol, I'll have somebody, I'll be in their life for about 24 months. And it's because it takes that long. If you really cannot settle your case, it's going to take that long to make your way through the legal system from, day one to trial date. And so that's where I want to just, really be clear that we can mediate, right, during this process. We can reach settlement, because that's what mediation is about. We want to reach settlement instead of going to trial. And that's what I really want people to understand, that mediation may not be the first step, because unless you know what the rules of the game are, you're just going to be sitting there kind of wondering what just happened. But if you get an attorney, you have certain timeframes that you have to respect. You serve somebody, they have to respond by 20 days. If you serve a motion for temporary orders, within 30 days you're going to have a hearing. So it moves the process along. But during that process, that's not to say that you and your soon-to-be ex-spouse and the attorney on the other side can't talk about the issues. And through the process of disclosure and making sure that there's full transparency in terms of what the documents are, what's driving the salary, what's driving the parenting time, etc., you can actually reach agreements, right? And so that's what I want to make sure that everybody understands walking away from this afternoon's show, that there is a place for it. It like with everything else, timing is what's really critical here.
Absolutely. Now, her phone number is 480-397-2261. That's, you can phone there. Now, you also have a text number, that's 520-355-4483. The website is Pintel, Pintel law.com. You also do a half-hour free consult that you were, obviously with people, you have to do that with this. You're valley-wide, and I think it's really important. There's a lot of people who are getting divorces, right? And especially when the weekend comes, it could be that you write the number down now, because you never know what the weekend could be like, or, and get prepared.
Listen, summer is coming. I jokingly tell people it's either going to be, a really crazy summer, or it's going to be a little bit slower for me, because, again, some people, they plan, okay, this may be the last vacation, whether anybody knows it or not, and I don't want to ruin summer vacation for the kids. When they go back to school in the fall, okay, great, now we're going to file for divorce. So I think definitely you want to reach out to an attorney. I do offer the half-hour free of charge consultation, because, like I said, this person is going to be in your life for several months, and you want to make sure that it's a really good fit for you, and that essentially you're in the hands of somebody who is going to treat you the way that you want to be treated. In the prior segment, it's about expectation. And I really do tell people, I have some people who don't hire me initially because they're like, I'm not telling you what you want to hear. I would rather tell you what I believe after 18 years of experience, what the judicial system is likely to give you as a result, instead of just telling somebody what they want to hear when I know that the judge is probably not going to rule that way.
So her phone number is 480-397-2261. It's important to call and have that consultation. First, start with that, even if it's something that that you're maybe putting off, that's okay. It's important that you get in and have and by the way, I'm going to say this too, that please, I've said this before, when your husband or whoever, your significant other says, don't worry, you don't need an attorney, I'm not going to hurt you, that's when you run and call her immediately.
I have to say that one of the most interesting things about doing this for a living is that now it doesn't faze me so much, but at first when I would have people call me, that they would talk about what their spouse wanted, and I would have to say, you know what, that's really great, but that's not what your relationship with me is about. This relationship is about what you need and what you want and what the legal system can provide for you. So it's, a mindset change, because a lot of, and I'm going to stereotype here a little bit, I apologize, but a lot of women would say, well, my husband tells me that I don't need the spousal maintenance.
Happened to me.
Or, the men would be, well, my wife tells me that I don't need to have more time with the children. And I'd be like, well, that's interesting, and that's their opinion, but now let's talk about what the law has to say here and what the judges are likely to do. And if that changes your mind, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. But I just want you to have the facts.
That's important. Her phone number again, it's 480-397-2261. 2261. You can also text her at 520-355-4483. It's Pintel, PINTEL law.com. She does a free half-hour consult. It really, really makes sense to call. And please, everybody, even if you're thinking about putting it off, I have to say, call and have that consultation and find out. Because when you talk about the judicial system, that's what other people don't, that's a whole nother side of all of this that you need to know about too. Again, that phone number is 480-397-2261, or for texting, it's 520-355-4483. She knows her stuff, 18 years. She's a family law attorney. She does a free half-hour consultant, and she is valley-wide. Hang tight, we'll be back in just a minute. So we're gonna keep on talking in here.
Yeah.
I know we haven't gotten to the second one, but we're gonna get to that next, okay? Well, when you work with people, a lot of times, I'm sure, even especially when they come in and tell you that, I don't want to hurt, or I know that my husband may not be able to do this because he doesn't work as much or whatever. How do you handle that?
For me personally, that's what I'm saying. I'm not running the show, right? It's your life, and I want to make sure that I can provide for you what you want to get out of this. So if you tell me, look, Susan, you've done, for instance, the spousal maintenance calculation worksheet, and you've shown me what the figures are, and you've shown me what I can ask for, okay? The ball is in your court, because you can choose like the least amount for the least duration, or you can choose the middle amount for the least duration. I mean, there are variables that I absolutely feel the client needs to take the reins and make the decision. And sometimes it really bothers me when I have these attorneys that are working with clients who, again, they just leave it, everything is in the client, in my opinion, everything is in the client's hands, right? I'm just there to give advice. So it bothers me sometimes when I look at opposing counsel and they're just making all the decisions for their client. And I know this because sometimes the spouses are talking behind the scenes, and so one spouse is like, hey, I really think that we can reach an agreement based on blah, blah, blah. And the other spouse says, yeah, I think that's a really great idea. And then they go back to their attorney, and the attorney's like, oh, absolutely not. And I find that's really hard for me to understand, because this is not your life attorney, right? This is the client's life. And so our job, the way that I look at it is, I do want you to know what the statute has to say. I do want you to know what salary is comprised of and how that's calculated by the court, okay? I do want you to know when bonuses are included, and I do want you to understand why some parenting plans may or may not work for a child a certain age. But having said that, if you and your spouse really do want to do week on, week off for a 6-month-old, which is not typically what the judge will want to see,
Especially,
if that's what you and your spouse want to do because of reasons that are very specific to your case, and you both agree without duress or anybody pushing you to do that, who am I to say no to that? Because it's not a crime, right? And it's going to work for you. And I think that's where a lot of attorneys sometimes, they do lose sight of that. And I don't, because I really do work one-on-one with the clients. I'm a solo practitioner.
I like that.
So that's where I'm like, I'm really listening to what you're telling me. And in fact, I had to just recently tell a client, like, I may not be the attorney for you because you're not going to like the result, and this is what you're asking me to do. Okay, we're wrapping up. He's telling me.
So at the break, we always talk to Facebook land a little bit, and I love when I do that because I get to know a little bit more. You work one-on-one
Yes.
with your clients, and I want people to understand what that means with you.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm a solo practitioner. I do everything. I don't have a paralegal. I don't have a legal assistant. I really, truly am this from day one to the conclusion. I'm handling your case 100%. And so that is a really good thing because, in my opinion, I really get to know the client and what the client wants and what the client needs, and I get to spend more time really understanding what the documents are telling me, and I get to have those discussions with the client. I think that there is an important component of giving a half-hour free consultation, because sometimes I do get people that call and I can already tell that, they're gonna want to talk to the attorney every day, at least twice a day. I don't have, and I'll say it, I don't have the capacity to do that. And I will always refer those people to other attorneys who have, the legal assistant and the paralegal and whatnot, because I do really want to match people up to the right attorney, especially because you are going to be with that person for such a long time. So it is about expectation and meeting and exceeding those expectations. So I really do like the client base that I have. I don't want the person who wants to serve subpoenas on every single banking institution. I don't want the people who, feel that they need to depose 3 people, because I don't have the staff for that, and I'm not the attorney for you. I can refer you to somebody who is that attorney. I just really do want to handle the people who say, okay, look, I am going to need to exchange rules of disclosure documents, 3 years worth of tax returns, pay stubs. I am going to look at retirement accounts and everything that I need to do the due diligence that I am mandated to do. But I really also do believe that I get the clients who understand the process and are willing to really hear the truth, which is really hard, right? It's very inconvenient to hear the truth. It's almost painful sometimes. And I get initially some people who say, well, I'm just not going to hire you because that's not what other attorneys have told me. And I'm okay with that. And ultimately, some of them do come back and they say, hey, hi, remember me? And I'm like, hey, you're not going to be offended if I laugh a little bit, right? And they're like, no. So what happened? Well, everything that you told me that was going to happen at the temporary orders hearing, yeah, it happened. And so I want to hire you because I don't think that the other attorney was really telling me things that I needed to know. They were just telling me things that I wanted to hear.
That's so important. Her phone number is 480-397-2261. You can also text her at 520-355-4483. So I don't think an attorney can serve as a mediator. Is that true?
Gosh, no, not at all. And so, like I said, you want to go ahead and have attorneys involved. You want to be able to try to settle the case informally, send settlement letters back and forth. I have gone a lot of times in most of my cases where we're really close and there are just some issues where neither party wants to budge, but I don't feel that this is worth going to trial over. Okay, trial is very expensive. It's very emotional. It's emotionally, financially, and psychologically draining. Some people you really don't need it. So a mediator is usually a former attorney or a still practicing attorney or a former judge. And basically we can either do that through private selection, meaning the parties pay, or in some instances you can go through the court system and they will basically do a rotation of people that are on a roster and they will serve as your mediator. And it's anywhere from, depending on the mediator. I've had a mediator who's been amazing, who said, okay, we weren't given enough time today, which is usually 2 hours, to reach resolution, but I'm willing to come back a second day if you all are, and we get resolution. And it's so much better because any judge will tell you, and they always do, you have more control over the outcome if you decide things yourself. You're not going to be as happy if you give me, a complete stranger, 3 hours to make a decision for you and your family. And so mediators, during the process, actually, when it's appropriate, which means after disclosure has been completed, after discovery has been completed, after you've tried informal settlement, if you still can't get to that resolution and full agreements, call the mediator in, because their job at that point is to say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what your attorneys are presenting, I know what would probably happen if you got in front of a judge, let me save you all the time, the expense, the heartache, the emotional, fallout, and they really are good at what they do. So in that sense, mediation really works under those circumstances.
After the fact, though, after they've worked with someone like you.
Yeah.
Yep. And though, if they needed, you, let's say, could.
Yeah,
am I correct on that?
I do not serve as formally. I don't hold myself out to be a mediator. But what I do is I do have clients come to me and say, "Hey, Susan, my spouse and I were almost 100% at the finish line. We've kind of done our research. We haven't hired attorneys. We don't. Usually, it's the clients who don't have children, because children it can be very emotional. Whereas, not to say that property is not emotional, but the paperwork is going to drive it, right? This is the value of the house. This is what's in the retirement accounts. This is what you're going to have to divide in terms of what's in the checking. This is how you're going to have to pay the credit card bills. And if I have people that come and say, hey, we're like 90% of the way home, then there's a really wonderful thing called the summary consent decree. And that means that from day one, we submit that agreement to the court. And so I only serve as the attorney for one of the parties. I can sit down with the other person and I basically say, here, I'm gonna tell you the law, I'm not gonna give you advice, okay? And 90% of the time, we are able to move forward and we submit a full agreement on day one. Nobody has to be served, nobody shows up in court, we're just waiting 60 days. On day 61, the summary consent decree gets routed internally in the court system and a commissioner will basically review it. And then it takes about 4 or 5 weeks after that for it to be signed and you're done. And that's like the sanest, happiest, least expensive, least emotionally devastating way to get through this process.
So is that what happens if someone cannot reach an agreement on day one?
Yeah, so if you can't reach agreement on day one, then I would say, look, for all the reasons that I've already outlined, you don't want to go to a mediator without having done your disclosure, without having really understood what the law has to say. Serve the person, okay? Start, quote unquote, the litigation track, but understand that if you get like a really good attorney, if I have a really good attorney on the other side, if you're willing to be reasonable, so is your soon-to-be ex-spouse, through that process, we can still reach, not the summary consent decree, but we can still reach a consent decree, which means that the parties have reached full agreements, and that is what we are filing with the court. So you still have the ability to reach those agreements. You don't need to go to trial, and that's really what I want to help people understand, because unless you have somebody who's super stubborn or there are like really complex issues where you need, you know, a lot of business valuations or you need a lot of appraisals for different real estate properties, you can and you should be able to really sit down with a good attorney who can walk you through the process and send some informal settlement offers to the other counsel and just really try, because even the judges will tell you nowadays that they do not want to set trial until you have gone through some kind of form of either court-sponsored mediation or private mediation.
I want to ask you, because a lot of now people, they're grandparents that are now taking care of the children, and there's when there's children involved, it's just takes it to a different level.
It's really hard because grandparent rights, you know, I have to have people understand, and this is what's really devastating, is that you may take care of your children's children for years, and that's really what happens. But grandparents' rights, if you have another viable parent, you still can get some visitation, but typically that just means 1 or 2 days a month for a couple of hours. So it's not at all anything that you know, you're like, well, wait a minute, I was taking care of this child for years single-handedly. And I can appreciate that, and I tell people, you know, the better option may be to go through guardianship, you know, voluntary guardianship, and if that's not enough, then that's a whole different topic for juvenile law, because that's where you can actually take permanent guardianship of your grandchildren. But that is not family law, that is juvenile law, and that's
totally
completely
different. But it could go
it could go that way, and I can refer some really great juvenile attorneys if you're looking for that.
For the last couple of minutes, I just want you to kind of get out the words that you would like to say to everybody out there.
Yeah, I think that if you have like a really great relationship with the attorney, if you choose the right person for you, if you're willing to hear some really hard truth, not necessarily what you want, you know, if you look at the reviews on my website, it really is corny, but I do believe in treating people the way I want to be treated. I want to be told the truth. I don't want people to sugarcoat it. I sure as hell don't want to be lied to, and I want the expectations that I provide to clients to line up with what I know is going to line up with what the judges are going to do. And that's really how I practice law, and that's how I sleep well at night, because other attorneys do things differently, and sometimes they just say, yeah, you want sole legal? Sure, I can get that for you, but with a full understanding that that's really not what's going to happen.
Also, what the difference is between a boutique firm, sorts for you, like you, and a big, huge firm.
Yeah. So I do get one-on-one time with a client. I don't have a paralegal, I don't have a legal assistant, I don't have somebody fielding my phone calls. I really do handle the case from day one all the way to the finish, and I really do think that I do know the case better. I've had, you know, some attorneys who don't know the exhibits because the paralegal was the one that was putting the exhibits together. So I'm not really exaggerating when I say, believe me, I will know you as well as you know yourself by the end of the 24 months.
And 18 years that she's been doing this. And what I want you to know also is that you know the law.
Yes.
You really know the law too. Very important. You can call her at 480-397-2261 or text her at 520-355-4483. It's Pintel, Pintel, law.com.